Why is Glenn thinking about Susan? Become friends with Susan. Why do you want to be friends with Susan, Glenn? You're literally the only person in the asylum who actually wants to have anything to do with Susan, and any time he interacts with her, he just fights with her anyway. So, what even is happening right now, Glenn? What are you up to? Or is this another one of your evil, mischievous schemes? At level 4 of the nectar making skill, and with 19 out of 50 excellent bottles of nectar made, Glenn is still working away at his aspiration. He's a long way off of making 100,000 simoleons, but at least he's getting a little bit closer with the other steps. Progress has been hampered because of Glenn's various mood swings. He's feeling hurt, he thinks he's got a missing piece, which is an interesting aspect of Glenn's personality. Although he's not strictly what you would call a people person, he certainly does like to surround himself with select people, which is probably why he constantly has that little thought about Susan hovering over his head. Why would anyone want to constantly be thinking about Susan Brown? But in between his mood swings, Glenn did manage to find moments of inspiration, and in doing so, he shortly found that he had made 26 out of 50 excellent bottles of nectar. Before long, Glenn had maxed the nectar making skill and made 33 excellent bottles of nectar. It was taking him a little bit longer to reach that 100,000 simoleons earned from nectar making, which is a little bit surprising because Glenn's never usually had problems making money from his things that he sells that causes him to become dazed, although those tend to be more harvestables, in line with his name of Glenn Green. Despite his continuing mood swings, though, Glenn continued pushing through and finally managed to create 40 out of the 50 required excellent bottles of nectar. As there was unfortunately no basement in the asylum, there was no way to really speed up the aging of the bottles other than to just store them in racking, for which he had acquired an extra rack and tried to fill it up. But as more time passed, some of Glenn's nectar did finally reach the finely aged stage, which made a big difference when selling it, and would inevitably help him reach that 100,000 goal a lot faster. Glenn's apparent friendship with Andy began to show some cracks, as was to be expected, because Andy, being the paranoid, strange individual that he is, began accusing Glenn of spying on him, which made Glenn terrified. Because Glenn Green was someone who could sometimes be a little bit prone to a bit of paranoia himself. And like most other inmates in the asylum, Glenn suffered from tension caused by festering bitterness. Festering bitterness caused by arguments and fights that he kept getting into with the other inmates. This was not something that was exclusive to Glenn, or any of the other inmates for that matter. But with one part of his aspiration complete, having reached level 5 of the nectar making skill, and being well on his way to making 50 out of 50 excellent bottles of nectar, Glenn was focusing more of his attention on selling the nectar to raise 100,000 simoleons. And doing that would mean aging it, and 2 racks was no longer enough. And so, after adding a few more, Glenn set off to continue making nectar. He would only need to make a few more bottles to reach that crucial 50 out of 50, and then after that it would just be a case of waiting as patiently as someone like Glenn Green possibly could for that nectar to all finally age and then sell it on. Unfortunately, this did mean it would be a little bit longer before Glenn could leave the asylum, but hopefully the end was finally in sight, because doing this multiple times a day was starting to become quite repetitive, and honestly would probably be enough to send anyone into a state of mind that would mean they might need to be committed to an asylum. And with that, we'll leave Glenn's story there for today. Join us next time as Glenn reaches 50 out of 50 excellent bottles of nectar and, hopefully, finally manages to raise 100,000 simoleons in nectar sales so that he can break free of the asylum. Thanks for watching. Here's another familiar face in this save file. It's the fake Emily Parcel. It's weird that the game generated someone who looks just like Emily Parcel. I might actually have to nab her and use her for one of my other playthroughs, just to see what she's really like.